Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar series with the City of Saskatoon, our Creating Safe Spaces of Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit Peoples panel discussion with the City of Saskatoon. My name is Christina Kaminsky and I'm with Sexual Assault Services of Saskatchewan. I'm very grateful and honored to be here today. And to get things started, I would like to acknowledge that Sexual Assault Services of Saskatchewan, our office is located on Treaty 4 territory, and we aim to serve all treaty territories that comprise Saskatchewan. For SAS and those of us who are settlers and guests on this land, I want to acknowledge that we seek to work in collaboration with the Métis Nation and all First Nations communities in order to address sexual violence, sexual exploitation, and human trafficking in our province. We truly believe that the fundamental principles and no systemic change cannot be enacted without being centered and grounded in decolonizing principles and the principles of reconciliation. Sexual Assault Services of Saskatchewan is a provincial nonprofit organization that works collectively with frontline agencies, community partners, and governments to provide support and advocacy for all of those who are affected by sexual violence. And the purpose of Sexual Violence Awareness Week, this entire week that we're having, is to raise public awareness for issues that relate to sexual violence in Saskatchewan through educational events, resources, and change-making conversations. Every year, SAS launches a provincial awareness campaign through collaborative efforts with our member agencies, provincial and national partners. And the aim of our campaign is to shine a light on the various forms of violence that exist within the continuum of sexual violence in our province. And the campaign changes from year to year. This year's Sexual Violence Awareness Week and the campaign we have decided upon focuses on the issue of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. Human trafficking and sexual exploitation are not new. They impact individuals within our province and have been for a very long time. However, there is also a significant gap when it comes to how we understand, address, and respond to this issue. So all week, we wanted to share an overarching message that people are sexually exploited and trafficked in this province every day, and most often by somebody in their life that they know, love, and trust. And so to continue to raise awareness that, like most forms of sexual violence, this oftentimes occurs within two individuals who know one another, who are acquainted with one another, and it occurs hidden from view and oftentimes within the home. And so I hope that you stay with us throughout this week for a full slate of other events and activities that you can register for free at our website, www.svaw2022.ca, and you can join webinars in progress all week. Thank you. And so why we're here today is to discuss the Coming Home report, as well as what the City of Saskatoon is doing to honor their commitments to missing and murdered Indigenous women and the calls for justice, as well as the TRC. So I thank you all for being with us here today. And without further ado, I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker and the moderator for this event, Cornelia La Liberté. So Cornelia is a Métis woman, and her family is from Green Lake, Saskatchewan. She's currently the coordinator for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit education for Greater Saskatoon Catholic schools. In this role, Cornelia has a responsibility for providing leadership to school administrators and teachers. Cornelia has a wide range of experiences in education, and she's also received a master's degree in education from the University of Waikato in New Zealand. So welcome, Cornelia, and I will let you take it away.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Christina. Welcome today, everybody. We're really excited to be hosting this webinar for you today. As mentioned, my name is Cornelia La Liberté, so welcome to the panel presentation for this evening. In 2019, the federal government released its final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. The report itself had 231 calls for justice in response to a directive from City Council to identify options as to how the city could respond to the calls justice, the City of Saskatoon released a report in August of 2021 entitled Indigenous Women and Girls in Two-Spirit Coming Home. This report itself will be the foundation for today's discussion. I know that a number of you have probably had a chance to peruse that report in advance, so thank you for that. Indigenous women and girls, Two-Spirit people face disproportionate violence, trauma, and exploitation. This is not simply an Indigenous issue, it is a community and a community safety issue. We have a collective responsibility for supporting Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people in our community in reclaiming their power and place. That is the purpose of today's session. So a little bit about the agenda itself. We will have some introductory comments being made, background into the report. We'll have a short break about midway through and then continue on with some panel presentations after that. So we are also utilizing the Q&A function in Zoom. So that's located at the bottom of your screen there. If you wanted you at any time throughout the presentation, please feel free to enter your questions into that Q&A, and those questions will be brought up as we go. So you don't have to wait for a specific time for that. So before we get started or go any further, I am going to now ask our elder from our committee, Elder Corin Yapes from the Beardies and Okamasis Cree Nation, if you could open us up with a prayer.
You hear me?
I can, but you're a little bit low.
Hello?
That sounds
Now
better.
you hear me?
Yes,
Well,
I
hi
can.
there.
Hello.
Well, hi there. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, you're good. Yes, kind of busy. But anyways, you want me to start a prayer?
Yes, please. Thank
Okay.
you.
Namamu tawin yan. Pagsewat si Hakinas kumpunan nuskagi sagak. Yesimia siki sagawi miya mamu tawin yan. Hamu takawi pik skwata ke katimamiyo paitik mamu tawin yan. Katimamiyo pai kumatuskewin. Oksisin tamata. Pitsaka puistaunan, mitsinan. Vitsu kamawakoye. Akio kuisfo kogutakan tuhtagi. Oksama sagagi sumutatan maamuktawin. Pitsaka puistaunan, noskagi skak. Vitsu kamaw piksko niya sikka pikskwataki. Oksama sagagi sumutatan maamuktawin nan kisagi nan ahaw. There.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Corinne. Oh, sorry, I'm just having some. There we go. Okay. All right. So I'm going to, it's now my pleasure to introduce Tennille Campbell, who is online today, and she's going to be going through a poem that she wrote for us, not for us, a poem that she had written. So Tennille is a Dene and Métis author and photographer from the English River First Nation. She completed her Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from University of BC and is currently enrolled in a PhD at the University of Saskatchewan. Her inaugural poetry book, Indian Love Poems, is an award-winning collection of poetry that focuses on Indigenous erotica using humor, storytelling to reclaim and explore ideas of Indigenous sexuality. She is also the artist behind Sweet Moon Photography and the co-creator of Tea and Bannock, and currently resides here in Saskatoon. Welcome so much, Tennille, to our panel today. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you for having me. I was asked to be present to read a poem that had recently been making the rounds about auntiehood, and it came from this collection called Naidina Zoo, which means good medicine in Dene. And The poem itself was written in appreciation, obviously, to all the aunties, to the women, to the matriarch, to the femmes in my life that have guided me. And I want to mention as well that as we read this, that for me, womanhood is inclusive and includes queer and trans and non-binary and gender fluid. If you see yourself in this poem is for you. We aren't all nice aunties, open arms and kind smiles. We don't all bake bannock, keep secret stores of dry meats and fresh blueberries. Some of us are called mean. Our tongue spares no one, fools tremble before us. Some of us are called city. We live under skyscrapers, walk in ivory towers with ivory people. Some of us are too much, too loud, too real. It's hard to take our love. But an auntie is an auntie. And the mean ones tell truth you don't want to hear. And the nice ones hold you when you break. And the quiet ones keep secrets whispered in the dark. And the loud ones match your wild stories. And the elderly ones watch us all, remembering the aunties who came before. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Neil. Thank you for sharing those words in your poetry with us today. So the next piece that we're going to move on to now is introducing the coming home report. So for that introduction, I am going to ask Melissa Cody, if you could turn your screen on while I read your introduction, that would be great. Melissa is a band member from the Cody First Nation and became Director of Indigenous Initiatives with the City of Saskatoon in 2020. In August. She brings many years of diverse experiences, holding a variety of positions within First Nations organizations and the provincial government. Melissa has been dedicated to Indigenous issues and development and has extensive experience in the area of policy analysis, and development, as well as economic development. Throughout her career, she has been committed to building meaningful relationships with the Indigenous community and organizations with the goals of ensuring that healthy, safe, and prosperous, inclusive community is being fostered. Melissa grew up on a farm near Yorkton, Saskatchewan, and holds a Bachelor of Arts degree as well as a law degree from the University of Saskatchewan as well. With that, it's my pleasure to ask Melissa to describe the process leading up to the coming home report, as well as introducing the report itself. Melissa.
Thank you, Cornelia, and thank you, Neil, for that poem. When we saw the poem, me and another staff member here at the city on social media, we thought that poem actually has a lot of meaning, and it would be a really great poem to start off the session, because there's a lot. There's a lot in that poem, obviously, in terms of the role of aunties and so on, which is obviously a key part of the report. Coming home report. And thank you to Elder Corinne for starting us off in a good way. Corinne has been walking with us since the city first started this work, and we've appreciated her guidance and her grounding as we work on such an important issue. So as Cornelia said, the final report for the national inquiry came out in 2019. And so the mandate of that report was to look into and report on the systemic causes of all forms of violence against Indigenous women and girls, including sexual violence, and to also examine the underlying causes of that, and also then to look into and report on the existing institutional policies and practices to address violence. The final report is comprised of truths of more than 2,380 family members, survivors of violence, experts, and knowledge keepers shared over the 2 years of cross-country public hearings and evidence gathering. The terms of reference and the appointments of the commissioners happened in August of 2016, and then the final report was released in June of 2019. The National Inquiry's guiding principle was that our women and our girls are sacred. So with respect to the 231 calls for justice, they're directed at governments, they're directed at institutions, at social service providers, at industries, and all Canadians. When we look at the calls for justice, a number of them are directed at all governments. And so from a municipal perspective, there is a difference of opinion in terms of how many of those calls for justice actually apply to municipal governments, since some of them are not necessarily within the jurisdiction of the municipal government, like child welfare. The report is also themed in terms of culture and health and wellness and human security and justice. And so, as Cornelia said, in response to the national inquiry, the City Council directed City administration to look at options for how the city could respond to the calls for justice. And so I just want to give a quick overview of the steps that we took and then talk a little bit about some of our thought process. We know that municipalities play an important role in supporting and implementing programs and policies that answer the calls for justice. We wanted to know where we should be leading, where we should be partnering, where we should be facilitating and supporting connections, and where we just need to step aside and get out of the way. We needed to start this work in a good way and continue it in a good way. And so the first phase of the work started with ceremony. And we recognize the importance of having an elder as part of our ongoing meetings. And as I said, Elder Curran has been with us on this journey. And as we're now in the second phase of this work, we also, again, started off with ceremony. And I personally have done a lot of praying with respect to this work. I recognize that by virtue of my position here at the city and the fact that I'm an Indigenous woman who does not look Indigenous, that I have some power and privilege and that I have an ability to influence, or at least I think I do. And with that comes responsibility, a lot of responsibility, and that's not lost on me with respect to this work. It became clear that we as a city couldn't do this work alone, and we shouldn't do this work alone. And we saw that relationships and partnerships were the key to actually moving forward on a lot of this work. We needed to bring in community partners and expertise. And so in November of 2020, we created Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls in Two-Spirit Advisory Group to assist the City of Saskatoon in selecting a consultant and providing guidance and advice to the consultant to develop a report and recommendations. The advisory group includes an elder, of course, as I said, the Aboriginal Friendship Centers of Saskatchewan, Women Walking Together, which is led by Darlene O'Mason-Sickbud and Myrna LaPlante, which many of you may know. Life Aid of Madeleine, Saskatoon Tribal Council, Out Saskatoon, Saskatoon Fire Department, Saskatoon Public Schools, the Greater Saskatoon Catholic Schools, Saskatchewan Health Authority, the Public Library, Saskatoon Police Service, the RCMP, and the 60s Scoop Society of Saskatchewan. And so a broad range of folks around the table. So the next thing that we did is we ended up issuing a call for proposals because we knew that we needed a consultant, people with expertise to help us. And so in February of 2021, the contract was awarded to Hope Restored Canada, a Saskatoon-based nonprofit organization who assists individuals in exiting human trafficking. Hope Restored Canada brought in a number of additional individuals, strong Indigenous women and allies with expertise to form part of their consultant team. So then over the next couple of months, as they did their research and finalized the reports, they met with the advisory group a number of times. They met regularly with me and Warren Isbister-Bear, who's the Truth and Reconciliation Coordinator here at the city. And there was a lot of great conversations and thinking and brainstorming that happened during all of those discussions. We knew that the report needed to be different, that it shouldn't be a check the box exercise on the calls for justice, checked and then done. And that we knew that there was work that needed to be done in community and that there's work that needs to be done internal to the city as well. So then that report was then provided to the Governance and Priorities Standing Policy Committee of City Council in July of 2021. And I have to say that I am very grateful for the advisory group. I'm grateful for the project leads and their consultant team. And I'm grateful for everyone who contributed to the report in some way or fashion. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Cornelia.
Thank you, Melissa. All right. Wow, it was So Melissa outlined the process leading up to the report and talked about the project leads for that report. So it's now my pleasure to introduce two of the project leads for the report as well, who are going to take us through a walkthrough of the key recommendations inside the report. So it's my pleasure, to introduce Marilyn Poitras and Gwen Duick. Marilyn is a midship Irish woman from the Canadian Prairies. She's worked as a lawyer, a law professor, institutional director, writer, film producer, negotiator, facilitator, public speaker, consultant, and a national inquiry commissioner. Welcome, Marilyn. Marilyn's also a mother, and that's her most important job that she has currently and always. She's a student of Indigenous legal traditions and has worked on the ancestral domain of Indigenous land teachings and source of law. Her expertise reaches into constitutional and Aboriginal law as well as Indigenous law. She's researched and lectured and coached on mental health and design thinking, on evaluation and the role and the value of story. Her work with community, leadership, women and girls, students, and cultural advisor has built a strong foundation for working across disciplines and on issues experienced by many Indigenous people and Indigenous communities throughout Canada today. Along with Marilyn is Gwen Duick. Gwen's career has included roles as a teacher, sessional lecturer, and chief executive officer. In 2008, Gwen was appointed as the executive director / CEO of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, a role which she held for 9 years. After leaving the Federation in 2019, she established her own independent consulting practice. Through her consulting services practice, Gwen has applied her 37 years of experience as an educator to commitment to social justice and equity issues, with the knowledge and skills gained throughout her career to develop interactive and engaging processes for management and boards to contribute to organizational success. She's an advocate for inclusion, diversity, and equity in organizational policies and practices. Gwen's experience in nonprofit boards includes membership on 2 nonprofit boards. She's currently the chair of the board for Hope Restored Canada, and she's also a grandmother to 6 and a mother to 2 sons and 2 daughters-in-law who all live in Saskatoon. Welcome so much, Marilyn and Gwen. I'm going to pass it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Cornelia. Beautiful. I guess I want to start with Nanetskman. I'm always grateful. Corrine has, I miss the Corrine prayers that we were getting when we were working on the project. She would ground us and laugh with us and encourage us through the work. And it was great. The advisory committee was absolutely crucial to the work, and we knew it, and they were included as a touchstone throughout the process. I just want to honor Tennille, working with the concept of auntie-hood has been so interesting during the report writing. A lot images were coming up all over the place with Indigenous auntie women and notes underneath, and the concept of listen to the aunties came through interviews that we were doing in communities. And we went home one night and we were reviewing, and I said to Gwen, well, what did you hear? And she said, I'm hearing like, listen to the aunties. That's what I'm hearing. And so it was a pretty easy shift. It's not a word that everybody attaches to. I want to honor that there are African-American Black sisters that are struggle with the fact that they were forced into auntie-hood, and it's not a label that they would take on themselves. And so this is a very particular kind of labeling and identification and kinship value system that I think that we hold quite strongly. And as somebody who works and practices in the area of Indigenous law, the laws that are foundational to our community come from those women. And so it was easy to move into the space of that in light of what we were looking at. And so I'll just tell you that you know, the city was looking, all the cities were looking for how to respond to the National Inquiry Report. And as somebody who is more than familiar with all of the reports and, you know, really the early stuff on the Manitoba Justice Inquiry and Helen Betty Osborne and the recommendations that have been coming through for decades through institutions alone, never mind communities and women and girls and trans folks themselves, like it was coming through institutionally for quite a while. When they asked us to take this on, we were really quick to say it's not just going to be another report with recommendations at the back. And so we got asked, what did we mean by that? What is that about? And I'll tell you some of the filters that I had. You know, we're looking at sexual assault. This is the week that we are breaking this open and having public conversations about it, inviting people into the room about it. And I was coming from some teachings with an elder that I work with that was saying sexuality is power and there is a sacredness to it. And we're forgetting that, and we're forgetting that that is why that level of domination and violence and control is going to the heart of that. It's because it has so much power. So that was a lens that I had when we went into this work. And so I also use design thinking in all the work that I'm doing. And so when people ask like, what was the process for this? I say it's the only process I use now, and that's design thinking. And so I'll just share that what we wanted to do when we started to look at the city of Saskatoon. So we're not looking at Regina, we're not looking at PA, although there's lots of overlap. We were looking at Saskatoon. And we were saying, what's here? The first step in a design thinking process is to say, okay, what is here? What do we have? Where's it coming from? How small, how big, how many people, how many resources, all of those things. What are the stories? Stories are easy to get. The stories are published all over the place. And then we'd go back to the advisory committee and say, here's what we're hearing so far. What do you think? What do you think? And they would guide us. Don't say this, say that. Look for here. Don't go here. Try this, try that. We were guided by these people who have lived experience with all of these issues, from kinship to, you know, institutional violence, to violence in family, to neglect around looking and finding our folks. And so we would go back and forth. And then the next thing we did was say, well, what if we expand this a little bit more? What if we look a little bit wider? Who else would we talk to? So we wanted to talk to not only the people in the list from the National Inquiry Report, we wanted to see what the artists had to say. We wanted youth involved. We wanted the Rotary Club, for example. Who are the everyday people in the city of Saskatoon and what are they doing? We were getting people reaching back to us saying, what can we do? We really wanted to know, what are the issues here? What is the perception? And Gwen's going to tell you a little bit about how we access that kind of information. And I'll just finish up with, after we did what if we looked a little broader? What if we looked a little bit deeper? We went, what would be amazing? What would be an amazing creation for the city of Saskatoon that we believe could happen in any city, but we'll look at the resources that are here. And we started to create this concept of Indigenous women not being studied, doing the studying, not being interviewed, interviewing, being meaningful participants, experts, and a central engaged participant in the city of Saskatoon. What would it look like if Indigenous women had a say in how Saskatoon is created and how it's run and how it could be a home for Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people? And so this report was the result of that. And I'm going to let Gwen tell you a little bit about our process there.
Thanks, Marilyn. And I also want to acknowledge today, thank you, and thank Corinne for starting us off in a really good way, for Cornelia setting us up for this panel discussion. And Tennille, your poem was beautiful, and it fits so appropriately with the theme that we have chosen as a central part of the report. Marilyn has already talked a little bit about how we didn't want to just look at all of the recommendations that came out of the IWG2S report and just add to that our own recommendations. We really wanted to spend time listening to the voices of women in our community and others in our community as well. So as we were framing the consultation, Melissa referenced already the meetings that we had regularly with her and also with Warren and others that were connected closely to the work within the city. And the advisory committee helped us to shape and reshape and just redesign essentially what it was that we were intending to do. And so the report, as you see it, it's neither technical, it's not linear in its presentation, but if you've read the report, you will see quotes sprinkled throughout the entire report. So there's the narrative itself, but the quotes, and those quotes are reflective of the conversations that we had with lots of people. We conducted a panel, or we had an online panel, that Indigenous panel that people could participate in. It was a survey form. From that, they got to write their stories. And out of those stories, we were able to pull the themes that were coming around safety and security, and such rich data that came from all of the survey participants that we interacted with. And then we interviewed organizations in the city, some community-based organizations. We interviewed people from the Chamber of Commerce, from Tourism Saskatoon, and others. You can see some of those individuals listed in the report if you want to know exactly who they were. And they also talked about their commitment, even as non-Indigenous people, and certainly that's where I'm coming from, the commitment to ensuring that the recommendations would be received well by the city, but also would be bold and challenging. And we did write that in our report and in our first presentation to the City Council as well, that these are bold recommendations and that we are looking for something to be different in terms of the future for Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people, but for all citizens in Saskatoon. And one of the things that we heard as well from those that we interviewed is that we wanted to challenge some assumptions, test the mythology that's out there, that Saskatoon is not safe. Yes, shine a flashlight on some things in the city that could be done differently to increase safety and security, but we also wanted to not just do deficit reporting and deficit writing that Saskatoon isn't safe. There are places in the core city of Saskatoon that are home to hundreds and thousands of people that they love the city, they love that part of the city, and for the assumptions to be challenged around it not being safe. And that was one of the things that we heard. So much already exists in the city. Much of it is being offered and supported by agencies, nonprofit organizations that are working to increase safety, security. We still have work to do to enhance the trust in the city, and you'll see that in one of the recommendations as well that we have. The theme of listening to the Aunties is all about what we said so far, about listening to those in the community, the women in the community, the girls in the community, Two-Spirit people in the community, understanding what it is that they are offering, what they are celebrating, what they are looking for, and then looking for ways to support that. So I'll turn it back to you, Marilyn, to talk a little bit more about our recommendations and where we've gone.
Thank you, Gwen. One more thing I'd like you to add to what you're talking about is what you heard in the discussion last night on matriarch. I think that's just an interesting, because the labeling is catching people up. And I'm not an auntie, I am an auntie, I'm proudly an auntie. What do you mean feminism? You know, we struggled with all of those things. And what's a matriarch? It's been coming up.
Yeah, and I was telling Marilyn as we were preparing for today, I yesterday participated in a seminar that was hosted by the University of Manitoba, and I think you can go online and find it. They recorded it or somehow access it. And one of their researchers, Dr. Jennifer Brandt, was talking about maternal methodologies that she is utilizing in her research, and it's a research approach. And it's not about, I think one of the things that was really highlighted in the presentation that she did yesterday is that when we think of maternal, it's not just about maternal being nurturing. That's a very Western definition and a non-Indigenous definition of what maternal is. And also the discomfort that some have with the framing of matriarch and coming from a maternal society versus just a matriarchal society. And so it was just helpful to hear her challenge some assumptions. And I think it was an invitation for me, to me, not as I wasn't a panelist, but as a participant, an invitation to be reflective about the assumptions that we hold and have been informed by our Western settler colonial kind of framing.
Awesome, thank you. So I just want to pick up a little bit on the language and what we're looking for in terms of story and what deficit model reporting is. And when we did the presentation to City Council, you know, one of the things that happened to me in the writing of this report, and I have been around this information for all of my adult life in terms of trying to deal with it. And certainly in my childhood, in terms of the brunt of racism, when you grow up in a small community, it doesn't matter what color you are, everybody knows who the Indigenous people are. And definitely we were targeted for sexual assault and violence. It occurred to me how often Indigenous women are requested to expose repeatedly the events of their life. And there's some level of we need this story to get out there, people can't hear it. And there's some kind of creepy level of voyeurism that we want Indigenous women to keep telling this story over and over and to be rewarded for it. And I wondered why that bothered me so much while we were doing this report. And then I started to realize that nobody asks me about the auntie that grounded me the second I was in trouble. Nobody asked me about the strength of the women that I come from. Nobody asked me about my father being the rock in my home. In fact, I've been in interviews where I start talking about the positive things in my life and the strength that I come from. Yeah, I've got some stuff going on, but that's not my whole story. And I've been told we're not interested in that information, Marilyn. We'd like something else. And so all of that started to really come to me, and I started to re-examine the old reports that I was using, and I started to see, wow, Indigenous women are studied for the deficit of everything. And when you look at something that's right in your face with all of this, and it's the relationship between police and Indigenous women, we look at like, well, what's wrong with these women? Why aren't they communicating? How should they communicate? How often should they communicate? Who should they communicate with? That was not the focus. The focus is, do we have healthy police to do healthy policing? Do they have the services that they need? Are they connected into the community the way they need to be connected? So my language after my time on the commission was, let's turn the lens around. Let's turn the lens around. What's actually going on in a bigger way? once we started interviewing people, we really started to see that home was the theme. Home, 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 home. I want to feel safe here. I want to know I'm welcome here. I want to know Saskatoon welcomes and respects and will give me space to be at home, just like everybody else. I want to know corporate industry is going to be a safe place for me. The burgeoning industry right now in Canada is investigations on sexual harassment against Indigenous women in the workplace. Like, this is there. I've got so many, I've been teaching in the law school for years. I have so many people calling me say, I need an Indigenous lawyer to deal with this because there's Indigenous people involved. And so I'm not sure it's exploding. I'm sure that the reporting of it is, because we're starting to find some safe places. So how are we going to do this? You know, the early words that you heard today were a lot of this stuff happens in our own homes. So are private homes safe? Are we safe in our family? And if we're not, where do we find that safety? How many young women have come to me and say, I don't have an elder, I don't have an auntie, where am I going to get that? I'm not from here. So how do we create that space in Saskatoon? And for me, it was having a key component in the city of Saskatoon as a matriarch, as this office of the matriarch, where you want to set up a new subdivision in the city of Saskatoon. We're going to bring this matriarch in, this woman who knows Saskatoon and knows these issues, and she's going to be involved in this conversation. You want to talk about safe streets, you want to talk about political issues, you want to talk about resources and environmental issues in the city. These women come from those teachings and have something to offer. And we had a meeting with the city of Saskatoon after we finished this report, and it was I might get emotional again. There was a young engineer that came on the call that said that he had done some work with STC, and he's just doing his job as an engineer. And he said, I got asked to participate in some ceremony, and I got asked to sort of really get to know the people that I'm working with. And he said, it's changed me as an engineer in the city of Saskatoon. And if you want me to be educated about this, I would love to educate my team. Get me the resources, help me do this. It was such a positive experience. And so I think some good questions about how do we do this and where do we start is always listening, always listening, always listening. You know, the mayor has stepped up. I got phone calls when he was speaking at a Métis organization, Métis Nation meeting, saying, Charlie Clark is talking about this right now, and he's taking it seriously, and we're going to take this seriously, and this is actually going to happen. And I can't believe the city's going to do this. And like, those are moments that you really hope that you are part of, that you are part of creating this. And so one of the things that we talk about in the creation of it was it took a village to write this report. It took so many people to write this report, so many stories to come forward with this model that is out of the box, that is, what are you talking about and how does that deal with violence against women and girls and two-spirited people. And we believe that pulling people home and making them part of the fabric and giving and recognizing responsibility and expertise and engagement is actually the way to do that. So my heart to everybody who reluctantly and I've heard this so many times, has become part of the family of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited. We want to find places where you feel like you're building something positive and that the loss is not for nothing, that these women and girls and two-spirited people haven't just been sacrificed. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Marilyn and Gwen, for that overview of the key recommendations of the report. I was just watching the chat a little bit. There's a lot of complimentary comments in the chat there for you, people just sharing their appreciation for your work. with missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, as well as work on the report itself. While you were talking, I was finding it interesting. Marilyn, you mentioned that as Indigenous women, we're not only our trauma, and that there's a lot of deficit-based thinking about everything when it comes to studying Indigenous women, which led you to flipping your data analysis on that. So I just had one particular question, I guess, for maybe both of you, was that in terms of like doing the research and working with the broad base of community people that you did in doing that and gathering those voices and storying, was there anything really that surprised you in this work? I know that you've been doing this work for quite a while, or something in particular that stood out.
For me, it was a number of resources already available. For me, it was, we got to get the right hand talking to the left hand. There's so much available. I watched a video on design thinking about, I don't know, 6 years ago, maybe more. And it was about a woman with kids, and she had been in custody and she had been in violent relationships and her kids had been in trouble. And they were like, what is going on? It was in the UK. And so they hired a design thinking team to come in and look at this. And once they started looking at it, she had 27 experts attached to her in some variety, right? Through the education system, through the correction system, through employment services, through the city, through 27 experts attached to this family. So they got the experts in and they talked to them together. And the experts started realizing that about 70% of their work was on the file, and just a very small percentage was spent with her, and that they had not been talking to each other at all. So she was just really data for them to write up. And so they put all these people together and figured out they didn't need 27 of them, go figure. And how can they now create this team that is actually a support system for this woman? And of course, her life turned around. The kids stayed with her longer. She wasn't moving from apartment to apartment. She got a job, and it was just a matter of taking the resources and rejigging them. And the more we talked to people, the more we were blown away by how much is in the city already. That was mine. Gwen?
Well, I was going to say almost the same thing, that there is so much, but that opportunity for coordination. And even when we talk about the office of the matriarch in the recommendations, there is a coordination role, an opportunity to connect people with other people. And it is about relationship. And you'll see that in the report as well, that the significance of kinship, the significance of relationship between individuals and also between organizations or agencies within the city, and all of that will contribute to safety and security. That theme comes up over and over again. So is that a surprise in terms of the research? Yes and no, but it was affirming to hear that in so many of the interviews and in the data that we were collecting, and just the significance of listening to each other. That was a really important part of being on the team and with everyone that we worked with.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that concrete example. 27. Wow. That helps bring it into perspective, and I think draw a connection to the work in connecting, and I think working better together that we could do within the city of Saskatoon. So I think that's a good lead in actually now for our next piece. So next on the agenda, what we have now is room for about let's see here, about a 10-minute break or so. So we'll break shortly. After that, we will have a panel presentation coming to you after that. So I'll leave you for about a 10-minute break if you want to grab a drink, go to the washroom, whatever that might be, and join back on at about 1:05. See you soon. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. All right. Well, we're doing pretty good for time so far. So for the rest of the next portion of the agenda, if you would, what we're going to do now is have a panel discussion briefly. So we're going to be listening to Dorothea Swift-Wolf, Faith Bossy, and Brooke Pewapskonius, Lalaberty Pewapskonius. After that, we will have some more time for chat and interaction, and then get you on your way about 2 o'clock. So with that, we're going to start first with Dorothea, Faith, and Brooke. So if I could ask you all to turn on your cameras, I will pull up your bios and have a brief introduction. So Dorothea Swift-Wolf is a mother of 8, a grandmother of 14. According to her, she's very rich with love currently. She has worked with the Saskatoon Police Service Victim Services for the past 15 years, but has done frontline work in the City of Saskatoon for the past 25. In her current position as missing person liaison, she supports families with a missing loved one. Dorothea can be seen marching alongside families and or speaking to bring awareness to change. Faith Bossy. Faith is 20 years old and was born and raised in Saskatoon. She is the daughter of the late Daleen K. Bossy, who went missing in 2004 and was found murdered in 2008. She's graduated from Oskayak High School in 2021. She's currently attending the University of Saskatchewan and will be attending the University of Calgary in the fall. Faith, from a young age, has attended many missing and murdered Indigenous women gatherings and ceremonies in Toronto, Vancouver, Ottawa, around home, and in Saskatoon. Faith has become a strong voice for youth and survivors of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Thank you, Faith. And we will also be listening to Brooke Lalaberty Pewapskonius. Brooke is a proud two-spirited Esqueo from the Canoe Lake Cree First Nation, Treaty 10 territory with family connections in Powmaker Cree Nation in Treaty 6. She's a graduate of the Indian Institute of Technology, where she attained a business administration diploma. She's also an undergraduate of the Edwards School of Business, where she completed a Bachelor of Commerce with a major in management. Brooke works currently at the Dakota Dunes Community Development Corporation as the Community Investment Coordinator, and she has also worked with the City of Saskatoon for 6 years in parks and Indigenous initiatives. Brooke's an avid volunteer. On the Two-Spirit Powwow Committee without Saskatoon, she sits on Heritage Saskatchewan's Board of Directors and is an alumni advisor with the Indigenous Student Society at the Edwards School of Business. Brooke takes pride in her community and getting involved with grassroots organizations. She loves to stay active, maintain a balanced, healthy, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. She's also, when she's not working or volunteering, you can follow her on the ball, find her on the ball field, biking, playing hockey, golfing, gardening, traveling, walking her dog, or with her 2 rescue cats. Welcome, Brooke. Well, we're so excited to have all 3 of you join us right now. So what we're going to be talking about now is the role and the impact of the role, the importance, and the impact of aunties and the matriarchs. So I am going to pass it over to Dorothea first.
Good morning. That was a long introduction for me. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to come and share some of the teachings and knowledge that I have been given by many strong people in my world. When we think about what an auntie is, a matriarch or an uncle or whatever, to me, that is the person that creates a safe place for someone to go to. We all have an auntie, but an auntie also can be somebody that's not related to you by blood. When I think of my own life here in Saskatoon, I've had many aunties, some of them that I wasn't even related to. And I don't use the term aunties because I've also had uncles that were my safe place to go. So when you think of an auntie, we all have an auntie. We all had an auntie or an uncle or that safe person that we could go to. The poem that was shared this afternoon was an amazing poem because it kind of put it all together, right? We have aunties that may appear mean, but in all reality, they're speaking truth, right? And sometimes we have that auntie that we do need to speak truth to kind of snap us back into where we need to be. We also have, Brooke is laughing. I don't know if I'm a mean auntie. We have those aunties, those quiet aunties, right? The ones that are the keeper of our secrets, as she said in her poem. When I think of that, I think of that one auntie or that one person in my life that I could go talk to about anything with no judgment. The love that was so freely shared and giving me a safe place with that individual helped me along my journey through so many things. And yes, I did have a mean auntie, and her favorite word is when we weren't listening was wieners, right? So to this day, I know when I'm struggling and I need to fall back on the road where I'm supposed to be, I play that thought in my mind, wieners, right? And when people are like, what the hell are you talking about wieners for, right? But that's the connection I had with that one particular auntie. I have a two-spirited uncle that lives out in Winnipeg. I call him my auntie uncle. And sometimes as well, I reach out to him because he gives me knowledge and teachings in regards to the language. So the reason why I'm sharing a little bit about my aunties is so that my relatives, my people that have created and helped me become the individual that I am, is that they've given me the teachings or their teachings, shared their teachings, their stories, and helped me feel safe. And that's what it's about, right? When you think about safety, what does that mean? A safe place to be, you know, somebody you can reach out to, just to talk to, a safe place to have something to eat, a safe place to say, I'm having a really rough day. Those are the individuals, those are our aunties. Those are the other ones that we call and say, auntie, you know, I'm kind of struggling right now. Can you take me to ceremony? I've had aunties do that for me. So when we're talking about what the role of an auntie is a safe place. An auntie is the person that steps up when you need them at that moment in time. Whatever you're going through, positive, negative, whatever, that auntie is there. They're there through the journey of the struggles, through the laughter. They're the one that is available, or somebody that you feel comfortable with to go and talk to about anything and everything. I was very blessed to have lots of aunties who stepped up when my mom was struggling. And that's, my mom's been gone for 8 years. And the aunties in my life have stepped up to try to help me continue my journey by filling the void of not having a mother. Even though my mom did the best she could, she needed help and she reached out to the aunties, her sisters, her community, her relatives. It's kind of difficult to put, when you think of an auntie, it's kind of difficult to put down what the roles are, right? Because it encompasses so many different things. So for me, when I think of the role of my aunties, my relatives, it's to create a safe place where I feel comfortable, where I know I'm not judged, and where I can go. And to me, that's what the role of an auntie is. When you think of the city of Saskatoon, I grew up here and I've done frontline for over 25 years in the city. And you talk to the community and you ask them, where can I go? Where can I go find an auntie? Right? We joke and we say, oh, just wait, I'll check the Moxon Telegram and I'll find out who you need in your life. Brooke, don't laugh, Brooke, I can see you. Right? And it's like, okay, I'm going to call this person, call that person through Moxon Telegram, and we'll get back to you. I can guarantee you within about 5-10 minutes, there's an auntie or an auntie, right? Somebody that'll reach out to you and say, I'm here, come see me, come talk to me, let's have tea. What can we do? Right? Or if you need a safe place to be, again, if you reach out to whoever your people are, they can tell you, or they'll welcome you into their own home. Right? So when I think about this auntie report and I visualize what the city of Saskatoon is doing or creating, I just see a place where anybody can come and find that support, that guidance, that love that they're in need of, right? Because not all of us, as we get older, I don't know when the transition happens, we step into the role as aunties or grandmothers, or in my mind, I'm still only like 30 years old. If you look behind me, I was worried about my pictures behind me. All the pictures behind me are my children. I'm a mother of 8. And when I say that, that means I've raised those 8 children 24/7. But I've raised over 50 kids in the city of Saskatoon. Had the door open with very few restrictions, just no drugs, no alcohol, and no stealing, and no swearing. And that was it. And this door was always open for people to come sit, eat, sleep, find clothes, whatever. Right? And I think when I think about my life with all these children, I'm the one that's rich because they found me and I found them, and together we walked the journey side by side, not in front and not behind. To offer that support, that kindness, and that love. One of the most valuable teachings I ever received is to be a good person and live a good life. Seems simple when we say it, but to actually live your life that way is a little bit difficult. So I'm grateful that the city has taken this on. I'm grateful for all the strong individuals we have in the city of Saskatoon, people who want to bring change. I'm grateful for all the aunties, the relatives stepping up. I struggle with the title auntie, right? Because we always think of women when we use that term auntie, and then people will change it and say auntie uncle. Right? To me, the role of an auntie, uncle, whatever term you want to use, is just that individual who can provide a safe, healthy place for somebody to come and see, to talk, to laugh with, to cry with, to heal with, who's willing to share the knowledge, the teachings that they received and pass it on to them, and never to close the door. So I kind of hope that doesn't really define the roles of an auntie, because every auntie is different from each nation. But the most important thing is that they're there at that moment in time for kindness, with love and understanding. So I hope that kind of explains the role that I've been asked to speak about. If you have any questions, as they say, there's chat. There's chat, and I don't know how long I'm supposed to talk, because I could talk for days. So with that, I'd like to hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Dorothea. Thank you for your response and articulation of what auntie, or just a safe person, has meant to you personally and professionally. The visual, I guess, that that people can see on our screen. I think, albeit you may have said that it could have been distracting. I think that it's absolutely perfect, and that the background in your family home currently articulates how you are a safe place to those 50 children that have come through your home and experienced that with you. So thank you so much for your response to that. Okay, Brooke and Faith. I was wondering about the same question for both of you, and I guess listening to the explanation of aunties or auntyhood and then more broadly, I guess, just that safe person in your life that you have, and that everybody should have. Maybe the question for Brooke and for Faith, and I think I'll start with Faith first, is how important has it been for you, Faith, to have that safe person in your life that you were able to go to? And maybe just articulate a little bit on your experience, I guess, about the importance of having a safe person to go to talk to.
I don't even know where to start after what Dorothea said. I don't know. I was kind of writing down everything she was saying as well. I mean, growing up in this community, I've met so many, I guess what you would call aunties, but Dorothea being one of them, you know, she has been there since I was 3 years old. As well as Darlene and Myrna and all the other women involved in that group. I don't know, I guess all the trauma that I'm kind of working through it and going through my own healing process right now, trying to just accept everything of how my life was. And I was a very I don't even know how to explain it, but I mean, everything I've gone through, you'd expect not everything to come easy. In my teens, I kind of just rebelled against everyone, and I didn't know how to deal with anything, and I didn't want to listen to anyone. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I was kind of just really distant. I didn't care at the time. I didn't care about my mental health. I didn't care about myself. I got into trouble in school and drinking and drugs, and I'm so thankful I got out of that. But at the time, I didn't have someone. I didn't feel like I had someone to go to, and I feel like that's why that all that happened to me, because I felt alone during that time, even though I knew I wasn't alone. At the end of the day, I just felt like nobody understood me. But now that I have my son, he's 2 years old, and becoming a mother, it really, really changed my outlook on life, and wanting to heal myself for him, for myself, in the future that comes. But I think the people that were there, I would have considered my aunties, like my grandmothers, my kokum, my mushum, even the males. Like she said, the males had to have a good impact on you as well. My dad, my auntie Monica, she comes to a lot of the events with me. She's always been there by my side, and I would consider her one of my mother figures as well. So I don't know. I don't really know how to
That's a
follow up
perfect
on this thing. Yeah.
I thought that response was perfect, Faith. Yeah, it was. Thank you for sharing and talking, I guess, about your story of healing and recovery, and the importance of having your family, your kokum, your mushum, your auntie in your life to get you through that. to get you through that and the importance of family. And thanks for your vulnerability in this virtual platform as well. I know it's not always the easiest and a little bit impersonal, but thank you for that. And as Marilyn, we'll go back to what Marilyn said earlier about us as Indigenous women being more than the trauma of our past and our collective history together. So a role that you have now as a mother and a role model for that young man or young baby man in your life and going forward. So thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you as well for inviting me.
You're welcome. Okay, Brooke Pewapskonius. No, Laliberty Pewapskonius. Sorry, do you say La Liberty? You do.
It's La Liberty or La Liberty. It's all geographic. I don't mind.
Right. I know, because I always say La Liberty and I get corrected sometimes from people from Canoe Lake are like, no, that's not how you say it.
Yeah, I'm flexible. This is a safe space, so.
True. Okay. So I guess the same type of question for you. How important, I guess, just based on your experience, based on your own lived experience up until now, how important has it been for you to make sure that you have those safe people in your life, whether it be an auntie or an uncle, biological or not biological or whatever that might be, but how important and why is it important for you to have those people in your life?
Absolutely, thank you. I'd first like to start off by thanking Corinne for the prayer today, and by thanking Tennille for sharing that poem and leading us into to this panel in a good way. My name is Brooke Liberty Pewapskonius. My pronouns are she, her. And one of the main importance of having those safe spaces, like Dorothea said, is when we're having those bad days, to be able to go to someone and have those safe spaces and saying, hey, I'm really struggling right now. And that's powerful. That's creating that kinship relationship as well. I really appreciated how Dorothea talked about all the aunties. I was raised by a single mother. So my mother has multiple degrees and she's working on her master's as well. So my mother was always working. She was always at school. So it was my aunties that took care of me. It was my aunties that took me to sports. It was my aunties that took me to school and woke me up and braided my hair for the day. It was my aunties that I had on the weekends because my mom was always working. I was always in sports. And it was my family, it was my aunties that helped me fundraise for my sports as well. It was my aunties who worked bingos with us to help me have that safe space and that outlet with recreation as well, to let loose that way. So that was my one way of letting go of my trauma, was through sports, but then experiencing that with my aunties as well. And one of those, being able to have those matriarchs within our family as well. And I really appreciated how Dorothea was speaking about how she had a two-spirited uncle, because my two-spirited uncle as well, he doesn't like it when I call him uncle. He'd rather be referred to as auntie. And that he's that safe place. He's that matriarch for us. He creates that for us, and he doesn't mind at all. Like I said, I'm flexible, and that's how he is too. He's opening, he's welcoming, he's warm. He's that home fire. I know where I can go to feel that warmth, to feel that hug, to feel that love. So that's the most important, because as being Indigenous, being two-spirited, and being queer, those are three things that are against me. So those are hurdles to be able to come across. So to be able to have that safe space, and to be able to have that backbone support of my aunties behind me and being like my hype man and saying, no, my girl, like, you got this, like, keep pushing, agamemao. you got this. That is what is most important for me, because like I said, I have those three things pushing against me. When someone looks at me first, they see that I'm brown, and when they really start to look at me, they see that I'm a female, and then when I talk, they realize that I'm two-spirited and that I'm queer. And then so I have these, and that makes me vulnerable, that makes me targeted, uh, and it can really break down people. So the important for that safe space and that inclusive space as well for two-spirit and trans youth as well, for them to be able to come and talk openly and safely, specifically in ceremonies, for them to be able to have that safe space in ceremonies as well, and to not be shunned for who they are, to not have to modify themselves to come into ceremony as well. For two-spirit or trans youth to be able to come into the circle and to be able to not wear a skirt, or wear a skirt if they choose to, whatever they are comfortable with and whatever their identity wishes them. So I think that that's the most important, is to be able to have those aunties, to be able to have those backbone support, because and especially within ceremony, because way back I talked to an elder because I was having a hard time. I wanted to go to a ceremony, and I was told if I go to the ceremony that I to not mention that I'm two-spirited, to not be open with my own identity. And I never felt more unincluded in a ceremony, being told that, or being told that I have to wear a skirt to come to ceremony, because as me, that is personally not me. And for people to be able to come in to ceremony and be accepted for their true self is so important. And to have those aunties there with you, to be that backbone support. For Dorothea, you said the aunties will always take us to ceremony, and that's so important, because that's where that awareness comes from, and that backbone support is from our aunties, to be able to back us up and to be able to say, no, we are here, we are queer, and we are proud, and we are Indigenous, and we have always been a part of this circle, and it's time to revitalize that circle for two-spirited people, that we are accepted. We have always been a part of ceremony. When colonizers came, two-spirited people were targeted the first because it was against the Christian way. We didn't fall in between that man and woman. We have that a Yahweh, that Cree word, nor man nor woman. So we had that in our language before. We had those ceremonies before. We were accepted in that ceremonies before. And it's time for that revitalization within the circle of ceremonies for two-spirited and trans youth as well. And for us to have a space. And one of the questions I was asked is, what is the difference between two-spirited or the same as Indigenous women and girls? And one of the differences is that Indigenous women and girls have space within ceremony, and two-spirited, there's kind of this awkward gap on where do two-spirited people fall within ceremony. So that needs to be able to be talked about more. And I would like to give a shout out to Lyndon Linklater, because he held the Two-Spirit Sweat Lodge. And I'd like to give a shout out to Out Saskatoon for going out to the reservations and creating two-spirited powwows and creating that revitalization within our communities, because that's what we need the most. We need to be able to have that backbone support from our aunties. We need to be able to have those safe spaces, specifically in ceremony, because when us as Indigenous people, when we're hurting, well, where we want to go is we want to go to ceremony. But us as two-spirited and trans youth, we feel like we have no space within that ceremony. We have that gap where we're scared. So we need to be able to have that inclusive. That's why it's so important that we have two-spirited sweat lodges, two-spirited powwows, two-spirited round dance. So us as two-spirited people we are celebrated. But we also need to be accepted within powwows, within round dances, within sweat lodge, within ceremony, within sun dances, within rain dances. We need to be able to revitalize that and bring back the two-spirit and how important it is to have those safe spaces within our own communities as well. And another point I would like to mention is that when I talk to those safe spaces, and they say that, my girl, and they truly identify me as who I am as a two-spirited person, that touches me on another level. It makes me feel safe. It makes me feel calm. So another thing that I would like to mention is when trans youth are a part of these circles and that we use their chosen names as well and not their dead names when they come into ceremony, that we accept our two-spirit and our trans youth, and that they always have a space within those circles and within those ceremonies. And that's what I believe is truly important, to have those safe spaces for two-spirited and trans youth, and to never forget them, because sometimes we're always forgotten. Even Albert McLeod said with the Pope's apologies, the one thing that the Pope forgot to mention was two-spirited people. He forgot to mention the influence of two-spirited people and how we were stripped of our identity, we were stripped of our culture, we were stripped of our ceremonies, we were stripped of our languages, and we need to revitalize that. That those safe spaces need to be revitalized within our ceremonies. I would say.
Thank you so much for that, Brooke. Really, really great comments. Thank you again for your vulnerability and sharing. If you have a minute, please just go into the chat and read some comments in there. Everybody's singing your praise in there. It's incredible. So Dorothea, Faith, and Brooke, thank you so much today for sharing on our panel. It's really been a pleasure to listen to each one of you articulate the role of safe and inclusive communities, safe and inclusive people in our lives, and being vulnerable with that, talking about somebody in the chat mentioned thanks for sharing your medicine when Brooke was talking, and I thought that was a beautiful metaphor as we all move forward in this work together. So if there are any questions for either Faith, Dorothea, or Brooke, you can write those in the Q&A function and we will get to the questions there shortly. I did see earlier that there was one question that was entered into there earlier in the panel when we started, so we will get all the questions in there. Before we do that, we do have one more guest that will be joining us today, and that is His Worship Mayor Charlie Clark. So Mayor Charlie Clark will be talking about the city perspective and roles and responsibilities in spaces as a community leader. Before we get to hearing briefly from His Worship, I have a small bio I'm going to read about him. So Mayor Charlie Clark was re-elected as mayor in 2020 for a second term with a mandate to build a strong economic future where no one is left behind. Charlie will do this by continuing to work to foster innovative partnerships and build solutions to keep people safe, keep people working, and strive to make Saskatoon the most livable, medium-sized city in Canada. Charlie's passionate about Saskatoon, believes in the history of innovation, problem solving, and collaboration, can assist us in moving the city and leading Canada. His approach is centered on the belief that partnerships among groups and different perspectives can offer the best solutions to the challenges being faced in our cities and across the world. He's committed to building a stronger community where people see each other's strengths instead of differences, where families can thrive and children are be able to see themselves here, living here. He's married to Sarah, a law professor at the University of Saskatchewan, and they have 3 children, Simon, Ben, and Rachel. Previous to serving as mayor, Charlie was Ward 6 city councillor for 10 years, and before that elected life, he worked in the areas of meditation, community economic development, and has bachelor's degree in conflict Resolution and Education, as well as a master's in environmental studies. Thank you, His Worship. I'm going to pass it over to you.
All right. Tensei, good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Iwagamagantik, Itotemtik. As I learn to say all my relations, to say to each and every one of you, as we begin this, and I want to thank as well, Elder Corinne, for your prayer to start us off in a good way, for Tennille, that incredible poem that really is helping to teach us about what this role of aunties are, and to each person who has so courageously shared your perspective and your story. And I to Dorothea and Faith and Brooke, the honesty that you brought forward and your willingness to share such a personal perspective, I'm greatly appreciative of. And I also want to really thank our staff at the City of Saskatoon. Melissa started us off to explain the work and the history of this, and along with Warren, who I know is on the call, and many other members of the City of Saskatoon staff. I know there's some city councilors. I saw David Curtin, Hillary Goff, and Marin Lowen on the call, and also to Marilyn and Gwen. I am not going to speak for a long time because I know that we don't have much time for questions. And so I think the main thing that I actually want to say is I know this is difficult work, because what we're trying to do is to figure out how to take a lot of systems and programs and institutions that have been founded through the sort of colonial mindset, the often paternalistic sort of approach that has gotten us to this point where you don't have the voices of women, the voices of Indigenous women, Two-Spirit citizens centered, and to help us understand what we need to do to create that safety and to strengthen the circle that everybody has been talking about. And so in order for us, and to be honest, when you go to even within our city departments or partners and say what we want to do is to create an office of the matriarch within the City of Saskatoon, a lot of people scratch their heads and say, what does that mean and how is that going to work? Because it represents a different way of thinking. And I actually think that the report is right, that having a whole bunch of recommendations is not the answer to address what we need to do. We have to think differently, how we build and rebuild trust and relationships, and how we ensure that whatever we do is guided by the understanding and knowledge of the Aunties, is what we can do to actually create the safety and security, sense of belonging that all women, all people, all Two-Spirit people in our community deserve, and that will strengthen the whole community if we can do that. So I just want to say, to close, I want to ask and say that as mayor, I know we're going to need your ongoing help in this next stage as we sort through the implementation. And I know Melissa and our staff, I know my council colleagues, I know all of the partners who I want to really thank who've been part of this feel the same way. We have to build this together, and I see my job as one part of this, to help to create the space for us to think differently, to create that stronger circle and those programs, institutions, systems that really understand what it takes to create safety for everyone in our community. Thank you very much. Miigwech, hi.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, His Worship Clark. Okay, so we're now at the point in our agenda where we can take some questions. Again, for any questions related for any of the guests that you heard from today, if you had any questions for them, please write them in the Q&A and we will get to those. So while you're thinking about those questions, we do have the panel had a question for everybody listening. Our question for you And please feel free to write the answer to this particular question in the chat. So you'll write the question that you have for us in the Q&A, and then write down your response to this question that I'll tell you right away in the chat function. So the question for you is, how can participants, or how can you personally support this work going forward? So how can you support it, and or how can you lead your own action to make Saskatoon a safer, more inclusive community? So I guess it's like kind of worded like a call to action, if you would. What can you do personally to make our community a safer space? And if you could just write those in the chat, that would be great. And any questions for our panel inside the Q&A? Okay, so inside the Q&A function, there was a question earlier. Elder Yapes, are you still on the call with us? I believe you are. Crane?
Hi,
Hi,
hear me?
Kukum? Yes, I can.
Yeah, I've been listening to you.
Oh, great. Okay, so there was a question earlier. Somebody was just wondering if you could, I know it was a while ago, but if you could just give some context or some interpretation, if you would, for the prayer that you said earlier.
The prayer, well, what I usually pray is I ask the Creator to guide us, the woman that's doing this job as the group, for this group to be looked after and do what you need to do with our people, and to be guided in a good way, to give us strength to make things change as you're going, and in the people also that are struggling on this in our community and the urban settings. You know, we need to do a job, and we have to get into action and help these, because I know the experience I went through when I was working with the social services a few years back. I was a support worker, and I was working with the area about, they called it the core. So I was working with several women with kids, you know, and to me, you have, being a support worker, I had to do my job to make them feel that there are, you know, there's a way you could change your life. And it's not easy, to tell the truth. It's not easy, but you have to stand with those people, you know, those women that are struggling. You know, it's just not there, you know, but you need to do your job. And I had several women that I worked with, and I kind of did the healing circles with younger women, you know, and to me, it works. If they want to change, it works. So you need to stand by these people, these ladies, to stand by them. You know, it's just like reliving again, but in a good way. Eh? And the experience I had, one lady, and she had 2 kids, and she was standing in the streets. So I was sent to her, and I had to make a plan for her. So what to do? She had 2 kids. Okay, we'll do this, do that, but I had to make a plan, and I did. You know, and so I started taking her out, taking her kids, things like that, eh? And apparently she worked before, but when she moved back to Saskatoon, she was on the streets, eh? And but anyways, it worked. I spent a lot of times talking. Sometimes I used to late at night she'll be phoning me and asking me questions, and and she was healing, and she went back to she stopped what she was doing, and she spent a lot of time with her kids at that point. And before that, I guess she was just leaving the kids all over the place. But when I was working with her, she changed, and she spent a lot of time with her kids. And she moved back to DePaul, Manitoba. And she had a good job. I was at Fire Creek. A couple of years ago, I had a Fire Creek, and I was gassing up, and I said, and then she was calling me, Kokum. And I looked around, I couldn't see anybody. Like, all of a sudden, I seen this arm waving at me. She came over and hugged me. And she's got a good life now. She's got a job and attending to her kids, and and I was just happy for her. And she said, I'll never forget you, And also I had aunties too in my bringing up days. My Kokwemushon raised me, and I had my auntie was a few years older than me. She used to always take care of me, and I used to be different places, eh? And the way I felt, I was feeling that I was worthy, And as the years went by, and even my aunties, they were from Wapayton, they're Dakota, married into Beardies. I used to go and spend time with them, and they helped me lots. They accepted me who I was as a little girl. And that's they taught me lots. I have a little bit of understanding of Dakota language. But anyways, they helped me lots, and one of my aunties showed me how to crochet. Ever since that time, I've been crocheting, eh? And my other auntie used to do a lot of sewing, making quilts, crazy quilts. And I was very fortunate to have aunties. And my auntie that lived with us, and she used to buy me nice stuff, nice clothes, eh? So I was unfortunate. Then I went to residential school after that. So I was very fortunate to have aunties that really cared for me, And, we need to, sometimes when I'm sitting, meditating or thinking, I wish I was younger. Geez, I'd be all over it because doing these things, eh? And holding, sharing circles, about these women have pregnant and, and struggling with life, eh? I used to spend a lot of time with them. And, I wish I was more healthier, more younger. I'd be right over there. And, because I love people. I worked as home care. I've been working with home care. I love old people, and I'm a helper. I'm thankful that I'm giving that gift to help people, and residential school, and and all that, and being a 60 scope, and I went through everything, but I healed myself. I healed myself in my Indian culture to become where I am today. I am so thankful. And my daughter, she's 48, and she's an auntie. She's taking all these people in all the time. Every time I go at their place, you know, they'll have somebody there, and she's bringing up five, two of my great grandsons and three kids, but different dads. She took them in, and she's been looking after, make sure they're always eating and have good food, uh, cleaning them, and bathing them, make sure they're, you know, she just loves kids too, and but they're the three youngest ones, we have one of them. The three youngest one went back to their mom, so she's pretty lonely for them. Well, that's the way my life was. It's just, but I'm okay today, and I'm still go to the sweats and, you know, some dances. I can't wait for some dances to go and to get involved with them, and, you know, helping people here. You know, I'm not really educated, you know, as you could hear me talking just a simple English, but I could able to kind of express things too, and but I thank you for listening to me. You know, I hear about the two-spirited a long time ago, way back when I was so there was two-spirited woman in fire pots, and there's an elder was saying that they were treated very special. They were special couple, you know. There's a reason why they're here. It's up to us to love them, to accept them who they are, you know. Sometimes people, when I go places, I see people, you know, but I understand where they're coming from. People that goes through healing, you start understanding things, places, and people you see. And I'm very fortunate that where I'm at today. You know, people are people. We're here. The Creator put us here for a purpose, so it's up to us to love everybody and treat everybody equal. We're all equal. Nobody's better than anybody. We're all equal. That's the way I understand life. And thank you for listening to me. Hi.
Thank you so much, Corinne, for sharing your teachings with us. I know that it's in the work that you do with this community, with this committee, sorry, and within the community, particularly, I guess, also in the school that you work with. I know that you're an extremely valued member of that school community and those 400 plus children in there that call you, cook them, and look forward to seeing you each and every single day. So thank you for that. I realize that we are at the end of our agenda time, but I just had a couple of more things that no more than 5 minutes. I'll try to promise. So firstly, there's just one more question, and there was one question in the chat that I just wanted to make sure that we had some time to address that. And I think that Elder Corinne's words lead us well into that discussion. And the question was, how important is it for us in our community to ensure that Two-Spirit youth are incorporated into ceremony? So I think I'm going to pass that question over to one of our panel members, and I'll ask Brooke if you're able to come on, maybe if you wanted to just address that question briefly.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. It is very important for us as two-spirited people to be able to be welcomed within that ceremony as well, because as two-spirited people, when we're hurting, when we're having bad days, when we're grieving, that's where the place where we want to come is. We want to come to that circle. We want to come to ceremonies. We want to come and heal ourselves. But when we come to those circles, and we don't have space for us, and we get shunned away, and we're not accepted for who we are. We turn to other places, and those places are negative. Youth turn to drugs, alcohol, the streets, gangs, suicide. Suicide as an Indigenous youth, you're 2 to 3 times more likely to commit suicide within your life, and that heightens for people who are two-spirited. So for the importance for two-spirited people to be inclusive within those ceremonies is for us to be able to have that safe space. That's that safe space for us to be able to come and heal, for us to be able to come and connect to Creator, for us to be able to come and connect to our family, our community, because all those other things, drugs, alcohol, gangs, those all stem from that being broken, not having that sense of community, not having that sense of family. So people turn to other means of that. So to have the importance and to have those safe spaces for two-spirit and trans youth to be able to come into that ceremony and to be able to hear themselves within community.
Thank you so much for that. That's such a excellent response here. I think you just got to the point there, and I think it's very, very well thought out and well received. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I did have one last question for Tennille. Tennille, we were just wondering, I guess in relation to the poem that you read for us, that you read for us earlier, we were just wondering, how has it been received so far? And then secondly, I guess, how is your experience with poetry, I guess, as a voice? Like what has your experience been with poetry, and how has it been received?
The Auntie poem has been really popular. A lot of people feel connected to it. They can identify people in their lives as auntie figures, and it's also really interesting. Women my age, people my age, 35 and plus, leaning into that auntie role. And I think that's what I had originally written it about, because for sure I'm the mean auntie, I'm the truthful auntie. And the first time that a kid that wasn't my blood relation called me auntie, I was like, who's your mom? And it was a surprise to kind of see myself in that role. So I wrote it to kind of like honor that passage and honor the women around me. And as a voice, I think that as a voice for Indigenous women, Indigenous people, talking about sensuality and womanhood and matriarchy and motherhood, I'm one of many. And speaking of my personal relations and my relationship with those around me, I'm very honored when people can connect with that and people see their truth in these words, because that's what poetry and my storytelling is all about, the connections that we create with our experiences and our words. And it's just been an absolute honor and chaotic story and adventure after adventure with these poems and these books and the people who come up and tell me that they've read a poetry book for the first time. And, I'm just honored to be part of this process.
Thank you so much for that. The poem earlier that you read, again, thank you for staying on with us for the duration of this call and sharing your words with us earlier today. So that was great. Okay. Well, I don't see any more any questions in the Q&A. And I know, look it, I was doing pretty good. I said 5 minutes and we're at 2:05. I think we're doing good. So again, thank you to everybody that joined us today online. Thank you for taking the time to be with us, to share with us, and listen. It's been my pleasure to be your moderator for today. And with that, I guess we will end this call. So thank you for that. Bye-bye.